Hello and welcome, everybody. Daryl Snyder, Brandon Abbey, Fantasy Sports Logic and Sportstopia.io. Excited today. This is the second of what we hope will be many, 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 many. We try to get RC Fischer from FF Metrics to commit to 2 podcasts a day, but he's negotiated it down to maybe 1 or 2 a week. So this is the second one. We're excited. I have up in the screen share here tonight's exciting Showdown slate. Minnesota, Philadelphia, $1 million prize by DraftKings. They call it a Millie Maker. I'm playing in it. I'm pretty much leaning on RC and what I think he's going to call his back pocket picks to enlighten me to win the first of at least 2 this year. So the pressure's on him. But RC, if you haven't watched the first podcast we did, it's up in the same YouTube channel that you're viewing this one on. It also will be in Sportstopia. He did a great show on Monday talking about the we won't delve any deeper into what was the first week of not so exciting, and it even continued into the Jets that old game. We could talk for hours on what happened with the hype and the flag being ran out, and then unfortunately Aaron Rodgers. But RC, it is awesome to have you here. I'm
Appreciate
going
it.
to let us know. I mentioned before we came on, is this game tonight even worth watching after what we've seen so far in what they call the National Football League, or is it worth maybe turning on our TV tonight?
I mean, it could be worth watching, like watching a car crash or something that you can't turn your eyes away from. I don't know if week 2 is going to be an extension of week 1 with all of the terrible football play. So I'm interested in seeing if these teams get locked in a little bit better or if it's still more of a mess. The game tonight, there's so many wrinkles from this one that have unfolded, maybe unlike about any game in week 2 that's been affected by so many injuries. I mean, obviously the Jets with Aaron Rodgers, there's some key injuries out there that have already happened, but Minnesota, Philadelphia has several key injuries in this particular game. Um, the Eagles missing Bradbury, their starting corner, Blankenship, their best safety. So I mean, their half of their defensive backfield is likely going to be out. I think Bradbury already is, and Blankenship is probably going to be. Missing Kenneth Gainwell to me is no big deal. He's not. I don't think he was very good as a lead running back. They're going to put in guys that will do just fine. But for the Eagles, it's the secondary that's the problem. But as then excited as I got for maybe the possibility of Minnesota being able to take advantage of that, then they lost their starting center, which is huge. It's huge for any team when they lose their starting center, but especially for Minnesota. But then further complicating that, their left tackle, Darisaw, if he is out, then this game's going. I don't know what direction this game's going to go. If they're missing those 2 guys, and they're definitely missing one of them, but if they're missing both of those 2 guys, when they had that happen to them last year, they got crushed. So, and the Eagles could crush them anyway, but then if they're missing 40% and the best parts of their offensive line, then there's really going to be a problem. So there's all this intrigue from the injuries, and I'll just say, to set the table going into this game before we talk about individual players, from I watched the tape of the games of these 2 teams in week 1, and just to kind of set it the table on these 2 teams, what I saw week 1, I thought Minnesota should have won their game by 2 or more scores. That was ridiculous, the way that game went. And it was kind of like what happened to the Giants, what happened to some other teams where just weird fumbles, a turnover in the end zone or an interception in the end zone by Cousins, but there were 2 fumbles before that on drives. Like the Vikings were jamming it down the Buccaneers' throats. They were the far superior team, and then they ended up losing. The Buccaneers got every bounce, every break, every key play. They somehow found a way, and it wasn't because they were good. I just think that it was the luck of the Irish was happening to Tampa Bay. So this is a better Vikings team than the 0-1 team that showed up after week 1, but now they're missing key offensive linemen. On the Eagles side, they played a terrible game. They had the reverse where they got a gift of a 16-0 lead against the Patriots, and then they were proceeded to be outplayed by the Patriots for the next 3 quarters and hung on for the win. And the Patriots are terrible. And the Eagles were beaten by them for the final 3 quarters. So we know the Eagles are good, I think, but that was a bad looking team in week 1. And then now they're missing half of their secondary, and it was their defense that was as bad, was the worst thing I saw of the Eagles in week 1. So I'm looking at 2 teams here that feel like they're way in opposite directions, because the Eagles are 1-0 and the Vikings are 0-1. But I thought the Vikings played pretty well, not great, but pretty well, and the in week 1. Now with the injuries, where this game's going to go tonight, I'm highly interested in watching this game because I have no idea what we're about to see. I don't think it's going to be an obvious Eagles go out and just crush the hapless Minnesota Vikings.
Let me touch on, said a lot of great points, but let's assume, the center's out, if the tackle's out, for the Vikings. What is the strategy from a DFS standpoint? You have Jefferson, you have Osborne, you have Addison, you have Madison, and you have Chandler. So if you don't have any blocking, then the Eagles don't have any defensive backs or corners, right, that are experienced, because you're missing 2 on that side. So to me, I'm going to anticipate a big rush because they're going to try to not allow a receiver to get downfield or give the time to the quarterback. What's your thoughts on that scenario where there's gapping, weaknesses in that line? How does that play out from an offensive standpoint from the Vikings?
Alexander Madison is a terrible starting running back in the NFL. And now he's very limited. He needs an offensive line to push him to some low yards per carry. Now he's going to have missing offensive linemen against a pretty good Eagles front. There can't be a run game happening here, especially if Darrisaw's out. There can't be a running game here. The center being out is bad enough, is going to be lethal, but if both of those offensive linemen are out, it's really going to be lethal. So Madison isn't that good when everything is perfect in this matchup. Now it's going to go against them. This has to be the Vikings are going to get pushed into a situation where they're going to have to throw 45, 50 times in this game, either because the run game isn't working and or the Eagles seize control of this game because they're the better team and the Vikings are just going to have to play catch up, and Cousins is going to throw 45, 50 times.
What about Hawkinson then? Quick outs to him or a slot receiver?
The risk is that the offensive line is so butchered that he might not have enough time to make great hay. They might have to leave the tight ends in more to help protect. But I don't see any other way this can go, but besides Cousins throwing the ball a million times, even if he's under duress. So he might have 3 or 4 touchdown passes, 350 yards passing, and 3 interceptions and get sacked 5 times.
We were talking about that earlier. You could play the Eagles defense and still, right? Because Cousins is known to not make, and if he's going to have to hurry it, right? So imagine the Eagles, two things we talked about earlier. You got a scoop and score where Cousins goes back and he gets hit in the ball and it's scooped, right? Or he's trying to get it out because he has no blocking. So you have two Eagles touchdowns already, but Cousins throws for right. He could really be in the optimal with the Eagles defense,
Yeah.
and people don't play that, right? But
Yep.
you pointed out a scenario, so go ahead. That's a great point.
This cannot be Minnesota runs the game out, controls the game because they're running the ball effectively. So it has to be Cousins passing, who's terrific. He's not an elite, but he's in that next level underneath that. And obviously he's got Jefferson and everybody else. So Cousins is going to work on some level. He has to, because there's not going to be a run game in this game, which is going to help either Ty Chandler is the obvious below the surface option. But the thing to watch out for is if Minnesota has active for this game and they signed him to the roster this week, if he's not inactive, if Miles Gaskin, who they picked up from Miami
Yeah.
during the 53-man cut down, and then they released him because they had a roster crunch and they had to get other things, which I thought was strange that they did that. But then they suddenly re-signed him right back. The reason Miles Gaskin could come into play is Brian Flores is the defensive coordinator for the Vikings now. Brian Flores was last seen as the head coach of Miami, where he made Miles Gaskin his lead running back inexplicably, but he made Miles Gaskin his lead running back. So there's some connection to Miles Gaskin and the Minnesota Vikings. And then they just re-signed them back. He could get into that Ty Chandler role as well, and he may be a better option to run the ball against the teeth of the Eagles defense because Gaskin has a little bit more juice than what Madison does. So as a flyer, if he's active, you have to see if the Vikings actually activate him. If the Vikings,
$200 if he is.
yeah, I mean, he has
He's
to
a
be bottom of
He's
the
a Bell
barrel.
reincarnation from last week.
If he's active, then I'm going to be curious what's going to happen with him. If he's inactive, to me, that's a turbo boost for Ty Chandler. It has to be. There's nobody else there. So, um,
I love
from a
that.
from a backfield standpoint, that's where I think it's going. Obviously, the Eagles secondary is going to be all butchered up because of the injuries. The other starting safety stinks, Justin Evans. I can't even believe he's starting. And then Darius Slay is really good. Darius Slay will be on Justin Jefferson, I'm sure. And so will one of the safeties. This is going to be wide open for KJ Osborne in this game. And Addison, but Addison plays half the snaps of KJ Osborne. KJ Osborne is the starter, is the 1-2 punch. Addison is a nice wrinkle that gets added in. Um, Jefferson always finds a way to do his thing, but Slay gave him a tough time last time around, if I remember correctly. So this could be KJ Osborne and Addison versus the most advantageous parts of taking advantage of the Eagles' injuries in the secondary would be with Osborne and Addison.
I love it. So we'll watch if Gaston is active. You might want to take a flyer, $200. Could be. I remember him from Miami. He's kind of almost, he's out of the back, dump off guy, littler
He's
guy,
like
isn't
Ty
he?
Chandler. Yeah, he's like
Yeah,
Ty Chandler, but he's got more experience.
right. I remember he scored some points for the Dolphins. I'm gonna give you one more scenario before we flip it to the Philly side, but we saw it, and I'm not, but what is a scenario where that line, Cousins gets hit and God forbid he gets injured or taken out, right? Who's the backup that could be? We saw what happened with Wilson coming in 4 plays in. I mean, in this sort of game, I don't even know who the backup for the Vikings is, but who is he? And he, if you're going to throw a dart out there for one team, right, and you're going to put it in for the Millie Maker, then and I'm only saying that because of the line, not to have somebody get hurt, but again, we know quarterback, they go down. We know Cousins, there's no blocking. So what's your thought on that theory?
The backups to Cousins are probably the 2 worst backup quarterbacks in the entire NFL, only rivaled by the Eagles' backup quarterbacks. So if this gets into if the backup quarterbacks end up going into this game, you're gonna
I'm playing both defenses.
Yeah, you want to have the both opposing defenses.
You're really making me like that Eagle. Remember, I looked at that Brandon today on the Optimizer. I'm really liking the Eagles defense not for Cousins to get hurt, for a scoop and score and an interception and recovered fumbles. I mean,
if
I
the
like it a
Vikings
lot.
had if the Vikings had none of these offensive line issues, I would say that the Eagles are defenses in trouble because of their injuries and the way what they showed week 1. They got all kinds of problems at linebacker. They've got a nice front line that gives a surge, but if you plan around that, they have bad linebacker play, and now they've got a wounded secondary. Their back 7 is in trouble if Cousins can get to it.
There are a lot of ifs in this game.
Yeah, this game is going to be, I'm highly interested to see what part of the tug of war of this, the Eagles issues and now the Vikings issues brought on by injuries, which side of it is going to win. I'm not inclined to think this is an easy Eagles victory.
So you're thinking it's either going to be 14-10 or 35-21.
Yeah.
Again, I like the over because the defensive touchdowns are going to play in. If something's going to happen, I mean, there's no way with defensive back being out and defensive line that somebody doesn't take it to the house as a receiver, somebody doesn't score on the defense. That's why I really, a lot of people would look and think, I mean, Eagles defense, right? Yes, Eagles defense with full strength, and then the lines had to have moved up a little bit, I would think, but it's mid-40s, I think. I just think either way, it's going to be
49, but
what is it?
I thought it was 49. I'll check it, but
yeah, it just went up then.
A lot of unders won last week, that's for sure.
Yeah, but they've had a whole week to get better, and let's hope they did. I said it last show, the exhibition, that was their last exhibition game, and they showed it, even though they started the regulars. But
and I didn't check the weather yet today. I mean, part of everything being down last week was all the Northeast and Midwest games having played in a swamp conditions.
I'm checking that right.
The
That's
game
funny.
tonight
I'm
is
looking at it
fine
right now to see. Yeah,
I think the game is fine tonight, but I haven't checked the
49 and a half at the spread, so
that's as high as it's been.
That's what it is right now, 49 and a half.
Yeah. I thought it started out 40, 45 or 6, but okay, let's go to the other side of the ball. Even though you said, and I agree, Philly's backfield's always kind of been a 3-headed monster. Last year you had Sanders, but if it wasn't Sanders, it was Gainwell and Boston Scott, who's in play tonight, right? So all of a sudden you got Gainwell inactive. You've got Swift, who I don't know, was invisible in the New England game, and wasn't Penny not even active. So what's your thoughts on the offensive side of the ball with the Eagles?
One quick thing on the Vikings Eagles weather report. I'm looking at 70 degrees with a 0% chance of precipitation. So it's going to be perfect conditions tonight, which is going to favor a shootout via the passing games because there's such problems with the running games. The Eagles backfield, there's RC's vision of it, and then there's Nick Sirianni's vision of it. and the two may not meet each other. I assume, because it's the easy thing to assume, that DeAndre Swift will get the push to lead the way for the Eagles. And from what I saw in the preseason, and I'm not a big Swift fan, he looked fine. He looked like better than the other guys, quicker, can get out in space for fantasy football purposes. I think he would be the one to have some hope in, to get a bunch of catches, take advantage of the Eagles' offensive line prowess over top of the Vikings. So Swift is obvious. The non-obvious path is, I think Boston Scott is their best all-around running back. So, and
And familiar with the system, right? The other two guys are brand new, right?
and he's been there forever. And the way that they treated Swift last week, like if there was a big love affair for DeAndre Swift after trading for him and the name and all of that, he wouldn't have got just one touch last week. So I would have expected to see Swift get 6, 7, 8 touches, and then we'd go into this game without Gainwell and go, well, of course it's going to be Swift. Now I'm not so sure, because the week 1 card revealed was, we're not super into DeAndre Swift. Boston Scott is well respected leader of that team. Every time they put him every time they're in trouble in the past couple of years and have had to reluctantly turn to Boston Scott, he typically produces. He's worthy of doing a lot more, but he never gets the chance. So the obvious thing for me, when I ask myself a question about this game and I go, what will the NFL do? Like, the what would Jesus do bracelets, like what would the NFL do? And I asked that in the what would people who aren't that bright do? What's the obvious that they'll do? The obvious will be that they'll push Swift, and Boston Scott will remain in the closet, put away in a box, and Rashad Penny will get a few touches, and they'll see if somewhere between Penny and Swift somebody can get hot. What I'd like to see is, they're confused about which way to go. They're going to give them all touches and see who does something for them. And that Boston Scott, because of his experience and everything else and his talent, is going to emerge out of this as a shock, because he always does if you give him an opportunity beyond, 1 carry or 3 carries in the final 2 minutes of a blowout.
How's the Vikings? Are they solid on defense? No major injuries? You just said the offensive side, but I watched the Buccaneer game. I had some players in it, like I did in every game, but I saw Baker, do what he needed to do, right? And it's the defense. It's, to me, it wasn't anything outstanding, but you're playing against, you're talking about, I know you're going to get to the other side of the ball, but you got 3 elite receivers on that side of the ball too, and you got Goddard. So you really, right? And Goddard wasn't in the mix. So is Minnesota's defense, what would you say about that?
I would put them as a neutral factor. They're not to be feared, and I wouldn't put them in the camp of they're going to get run over. But if I was going to tilt one way or the other, it would be more that they can get trampled by the Eagles. They're not good or great. At best, they're okay, and more likely they're somewhere between soft and okay. They halted the Buccaneers' run game pretty well week 1, and I'm a huge Rachaad White fan, and they held him bottled up. But the Buccaneers didn't do themselves any favors, where they have a weak offensive line and they just kept running up the middle trying to salt that game away. They weren't very creative or clever. So I don't know how much of it was the Buccaneers are stink on the run, or the Vikings are pretty good against the run. Against the pass, it's hard to judge because Baker Mayfield is a bottom tier quarterback and Jalen Hurts is not. So Jalen Hurts could shred the Vikings this week and I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, I mean, you look at those weapons, right? That's why, to me, the game, quick strikes by the Eagles, whether I was looking at, I'm going to tell you a lineup that we thought the optimizer came up with. We had Hurts and the captain, Jefferson, DeAndre Swift, Cousins, Eagles defense, and Rashad Penny. So we took two of the running backs, right? And I'm thinking, well, we could even be really, let's play all three of the running backs and hope they all, but then you're like hoping that Hurts doesn't take one in. I mean, you're hoping for like a 42 to 45, 42 game or something, but you're trying to cover so much. You got to, in DFS, you got to make a stand somewhere, right? If you get so like, well, I want somebody's going to have a bigger game, Devontae Smith or Brown, pick your poison, right? Or Hurts takes off, and so I see you wanted to say something. What's your thoughts there?
I'm trying to make sure that I remember to hit on two names that you just mentioned. One, Dallas Goedert. There's been so much talk of him not having a catch and only getting one target. When those types of things happen to established players on the team, star players on the team, Goddard will probably have 2 or 3 of the first 3 targets in the game just to, show them they love them. So Goddard's a play in this. He may be the best receiver of the night for the Eagles just because they're trying to make it up to him for what they did last week, or he gets it all in the first series and he's never seen from again. But you mentioned Rashad Penny as, and we've talked about, Penny's going to get in. What if he gets hot? I would just throw this into the mix of the Eagles running back situation. Looking at them knowing them from the past and seeing them play in the preseason. DeAndre Swift looks as DeAndre Swift as he ever does. Fast guy, satellite back, not a legitimate 3-down back, but if he has to, he can take a workload. He's the fastest. He's the best pass receiver of the group. He looked fine in the preseason. Boston Scott is very effective, the strongest runner between he and Swift, experienced, respected. He could have something. Rashad Penny, 2021 Rashad Penny is better than both of these guys by multiples. But what I saw of Rashad Penny in the preseason, and probably why he was inactive week 1, he's coming off a major surgery. He did not look good in the preseason. It didn't look like he was going to be able to get by anybody. So if that sluggish, rusty, whatever, or completely hindered guy that's always hurt is going to appear in week 2 and get a couple touches to see how it's going, if that preseason rusty guy is there week 2, he is going to get 1 or 2 touches and that's it. I mean, maybe he snaps that, maybe he rises to full health when the spotlight is on, and then in which case he's the best running back on that team. But I did not see, and I love Rashad Penny and respect him and hate that he always gets hurt. That took his career away, but he did not look good in the preseason.
Yeah, he used to like super fast, right? I remember that there's always
Super
been a lot of
fast.
problem.
Yeah, at super fast at 225 to 235 pounds that he'd play at. But he looked very un-Rashad Penny like in the preseason.
So you're making me want to, if I go double running back, go with the Scott Swift, which are both threats out of the backfield, right? As well as, not that Penny isn't, but you're right. I mean, what was the reason last week that he was inactive? I thought maybe he's still dinged up, right? And it was wet and they didn't want to risk him, slipping with that injury and tweaking a knee or something. But great point. So if if I say you have to choose between Brown or Devontae tonight as the flavor of Hurts, if Hurts doesn't tuck it and run himself, which is all he tended to be. And this year it's be interesting. I didn't see him again. It was New England weather, right? So different at being at home. But I think especially watching injuries, those runners mature. Mahomes has gotten smarter. He still runs, right? But they don't. And Justin Fields, which we talked about, right? He takes off, but so they become a little wiser. But let's just say he throws. What's your Devontae or Brown tonight as who you think because of the matchups?
Because the matchup is neutral, there's no shutdown corner that's gonna go on to Brown and give him some kind of fits where I'd say, ooh, this might be a Devonta week. When everything is neutral or normal, I take AJ Brown, he just has a better connection with Jalen Hurts. And you can take Devonta Smith out of games with good coverage. AJ Brown is his own weapon. If you just get him the ball, he'll break tackles and run away from people. Devonta Smith doesn't have that same ability. He needs to get open. He needs Hurts to have time. He's great, but he's dependent on some things that AJ Brown just isn't as dependent on. So with everything being neutral and normal, I always have to take AJ Brown ahead of Devonta Smith.
I'm going to ask you then, okay. And I saw a name, I don't know, I think he had a few targets, Zacarias. He's very cheap. He's another receiver. I don't know if you even know who he is, but we know that the third, we're looking at, you got Vikings, you got Osborne, Addison, and Jefferson. So if you got Brown and you have Devontae, is there a third sneak in receiver there that, Goddard, but anybody there in your back pocket that you could pull out? But
I can't believe you asked if I even know who Olamide Zacchaeus is. Of course I know who
See, I didn't even say his name right, but I remember him from the Falcon, and I think he got some targets in that Patriots game. Right?
If you're gonna seek a third receiver out of someone's back pocket for this game, it's Quez Watkins. In week 1, Quez Watkins played 52 snaps. Zacchaeus played 7. So Watkins has been there for years. Watkins is a big play guy. Watkins can drop a 2 catch for 70 yards and a touchdown on you every so often around his games of 1 catch for 6 yards because they barely consider him with Brown and Smith being in play. Watkins had 2 catches for 17 yards last week. Watkins is a burner. Watkins can make things happen. So at any time, but it's been few and far between here lately. But I would not play Zacchaeus. I would play Watkins of those two if I had to pick one of those two.
Yeah, good pick.
He's had any snaps last week.
What, Brandon? I'm sorry.
Oh, I don't think Zacchaeus got any snaps last week.
Just 7.
Maybe I was thinking Watkins and I looked at Zacchaeus at his 200, but you're right. I think Watkins is around 1,1300, right? Brandon, what is he? I did remember reading. I think I flopped those two around. I like, even though I said his name wrong, Zacchaeus, but I remember him as a Falcon. And because of Ridley having such a standout game, I just thought another ex-Falcon was going to jump in and maybe.
And he's a good player, and he was supposed to start, and then he didn't start, and Watkins played most of the game, and Zacchaeus hardly didn't.
Yeah, Watkins is 3,000, so a lot
3,
more.
3,000? Is that in captain or in flex?
3,000. That's his flex.
Captain. Okay. So he's on the radar. He probably won't get, what's he projected ownership? Less than 1% or something?
7.5.
7.5%. So he'd be 93% ahead of the field. You need him in the house once, probably pretty good. Eagles defense, Cousins throws for 500. one fumble for a touchdown the other way, one interception, and there you got different. But yeah, that's some good insight. I mean, I read something and it, what's the game script going to be, knowing what you know, right? You painted a picture there, RC, of the game script is going to be, that there's not going to be a lot of protection for Cousins. That if he can somehow, roll out, or, he's not going to have a lot of time. So Jefferson's the kind of guy we've seen when, right, he can go up, just get a ball near him, and he seems to have right, that uncanny ability to go up and get it. And if you don't have backs, I mean, so you have to figure out a couple different game scripts, right? I absolutely positively do not think it's going to be low scoring, because I just think there's too many things, explosive plays or turnovers, that will relate to points. So my game script isn't going to be run on either side. I'm not going to play Madison. I'll play Chandler, like you said, out of the backfield as a guy that Cousins just has to, I mean, Madison, do they run my duel where Madison maybe blocks and Chandler, they just, he scoots out and they flip it to him. But I like that. But so I'm going to eliminate any low scoring. Last week it didn't work, or Monday night on no kickers. It ended up being the Jets defense and kickers, so it can haunt you. But the weather's great here tonight, as you said. I think it's conducive almost to, I think the line will push over 50 by the time it goes. So that's almost 4 touchdowns, 3.5 touchdowns apiece. So what's your game script? Give us 2 that you think are most likely to happen.
As far as the game overall script.
Yeah, how do you think it plays out with the injuries that we've said and the players that are, gonna play?
I think that the 2 most likely outcomes are the Eagles are able to control this game because the Vikings have a hard time blocking, and it's the Eagles score 25 plus, but the Vikings scuffle to about 14, 17, while the Eagles are at 30. The Eagles seize control and win 20, 27, 14, something along those lines is one path. The other path will be this gets into a shootout because it's 2 really good quarterbacks, 2, I'll say, neutral to sketchy defenses in perfect weather conditions. And this could be where the sloppiness of week 1 reverses into a sloppiness that just leads to a video game event, and it's 35-30 Eagles or 35-30 Vikings, and numbers are pouring out of every angle of this game.
Wouldn't it be something if we went from the lowest scoring first game in DFS to the highest? I mean,
That's
year,
usually how it works in the NFL. Like, the Giants lose 40-0. They'll go out and win by 30 this week. The Bengals can't complete a pass. Burrow will have 400 yards this week against the Ravens.
I love it. I like your analogies on all fronts. I appreciate we've got just a few minutes. I know you committed and appreciate that. You had a lot going on. Brandon, any questions you have for RC in closing? And wait, I'll set it up. It can't be about Stanford football, so it has to be something about tonight's game.
RC doesn't do college.
No, he doesn't do it. He's a Stanford grad, and he's going to talk about the game. He went to RC. He went to the Coliseum and saw Stanford hold USC within 45 or something. I think the line was 39.
We held them to 49 points in the first half.
I know enough college football to know not to bet on Stanford to win in a given week.
Hey, we beat Hawaii first week,
and
so.
Especially in this year's Pac-12.
Pac-2.
Yeah, or Pac-2, future Pac-2.
Yeah. Oh, well, no questions. I need to get back in and make some revisions on my lineups. And thanks for the tips, RC. Look forward to seeing them next Monday.
You are welcome.
Yeah, I love it. I took a lot of notes, a whole page, and I agree with everything.
One more note. Don't forget
Yeah.
about Josh Oliver on the Viking side, the second tight end. They run a lot of 2 tight end sets. He played 50% of the snaps roughly. He could be, if this game gets into a bit of a shootout, especially, he can be a guy near the red zone that slips out. He's a blocker, but he's actually a pretty good receiver. He could slip out for a touchdown out of nowhere. He's not a stiff, he's an above average tight end. But a lot of snaps because the Vikings want to play a lot of 12 personnel. And that
What's
would
his price,
help them.
Brandon? He's got to be cheap. How much?
$800.
800. There it is. Out of RC's hip pocket, back hip pocket. He
Save the
pulls
best
out
for last.
Yeah, he saves, and this will be viewed by eventually millions of people when the Millie Maker has been captured tonight. It's my first of only 2. I don't want to be, my goal is to win 2, but got to win 1. But no, I like that play a lot for other reasons, right? I mean, Hawkinson's definitely going to be covered because he is who he is. So if you want to be contrarian, you go the opposite way, and all of a sudden Oliver flips out for a couple of 8-9 yard touchdown in the red zone because everybody's flooding towards, even though they don't have anybody to flood on the defensive side of the ball towards the receivers, but he sort of floats out, right?
Yeah.
He gets the first one and you're going, oh my God. He gets the second one and you go, it's hammer time. We just did this. But RC, thank you. Anything in closing? I appreciate all your insights. I got Oliver with a big circle around it. I've got
I was gonna add in, Hawkinson's not been a touchdown producer with the Vikings. His typical line, I wouldn't be surprised if his line tonight is 9 catches for 35 yards and no touchdowns. That's about the way he's been going. A ton of catches with no yards and no touchdowns. So Oliver, I would just think Oliver's got as good a chance of scoring a touchdown as Hawkinson, even though Hawkinson will have 3 to 5 times the catches.
What's the ownership projection on Oliver? It's got to be nothing. 1%.
Let me see.
While you're looking that up, they signed Oliver in free agency. I thought they were signing him to replace TJ Hawkinson. They signed him to like a 3-year, $21 million deal. Oliver's no joke, was no, guy they picked up off the street that can block, so he's their second tight end. They put money into him. Then they put even more money into Hawkinson. I don't understand what the Vikings are doing, but that's neither here nor there.
9% ownership on Oliver.
9%.
Yeah.
There you go. 91% ahead of the field on a showdown slate. That's where you want to be. You get to the house and you're in good shape. RC, appreciate it. I know you have a cutoff time in less than 60 seconds, but thank you very much. Appreciate you. Going to render this video. I don't know if we want to. These are so many good nuggets, Brandon, and we keep them to ourselves or we let the public know, but I think we'll let the public know, and we can, if they didn't take advantage of them, we'll be able to show our score sheets tomorrow. And thank you for everything, and looking forward to that article coming out that you have for Sportstopia, and hopefully we can persuade you to come out and talk Monday on how it was a record-setting points performance by all the NFL teams, totally opposite of what we saw last week.
I would like to do that, and I hope it's not, wow, look at all the scoring. Now I lost all my fantasy games with high scoring instead of lost them all with low scoring.
No, it will be a good thing. We'll put good karma out there. But thank you. I'll be texting you during the game as I do, even though I know you totally get focused. I can tell when you're not watching my text and you're watching the game, which is important. But Wait for you to get back with me, but thank you. I'm going
Well-
to end this recording. Hold on so we can render it up real quick.